Well, good morning and welcome to another episode of the Coffee Break Podcast. I am Chad Lingefeld here with Loc-Doc Security, and today we have got a really special guest with us on the podcast. We're going to be talking about business practices, ideas, and strategies while we sit around and enjoy our cup of coffee. Today's guest is the co-founder and CEO of Brivo, Steve Van Til, and he's going to be hanging out with us for a little while on the podcast this morning, and we'll be right back after this.
Got so much to say. We got a podcast to make. We're sipping on lattes, and it's time for a coffee break. It's time for a coffee break. Oh yeah.
All right, we are back. Thank you very much for joining us today. And man, if this is your first time watching or listening to the podcast, we've got a slew of these online, locdoc.net/podcast. This is our 33rd episode, and it's a special one with Steve. Steve, thank you very much for taking time out of your schedule to be here.
Sure, it's my pleasure, Chad.
So you're joining us live from the actual world headquarters of Brivo in Bethesda, Maryland.
That's right.
I sometimes I joke around with people by saying this is the world headquarters of Loc-Doc Security, but it's really just our only headquarters. But you actually are at the world headquarters of Brivo because you guys have offices all over the place.
We do. And this past year, we just opened up an office in the Netherlands. So that's global.
It's wild. You got a lot of stuff going on there, and I can't wait to talk more about a lot of that. As part of our season 2 of the podcast, we introduced a new segment called and I guess it's not new anymore because this is our 13th time doing it, but we do an icebreaker question or a rapid fire question. So just a few quick fun questions to get to know you a little better. So these are, you have no prior knowledge of these questions. We'll just kind of toss them out to you. So first one, what food could you not live without? If you had to choose one food for the rest of your life that you couldn't live without, what would it be?
Granola. Yeah.
Sweet.
Because breakfast is the most important meal of the day.
It is.
There you have it.
There you go. Is that what you had this morning?
Yeah, I did.
Sweet. All right. Question number 2. What invention do you think will be popular in 20 years?
20 years. I think the phone's still going to be popular. It may not look like the phone of today, but the fact that it connects you with the rest of humanity, I think, is not going to diminish in importance.
Do you think anybody would have ever predicted this? We'd have this type of power in our hands even 10 years ago? I mean, it's wild.
Yeah, I got to give props to Dick Tracy because they had the wristwatch communicator with video quite a long time ago. So there you go.
So somebody did predict it. There you go. All right, number 3. What interesting skill do you want to learn?
Well, one I've invested some time in learning is programming artificial intelligence projects.
Now that's exciting. That would be a fun conversation to have. All right, number 4. If you were an Olympic athlete, what sport would you compete in?
Bicycling.
Yeah, you're an avid cyclist.
Correct.
So I've got a buddy of mine, Aaron, that is big into this. I think we've talked about it before, but it's pretty interesting. It's something that I don't know that a lot of people know about you.
Probably not. I don't talk about it a lot. It doesn't really come up that much, but certainly the people here at Brivo understand it. We've got quite a few cyclists here.
So what is the kind of distance? Are you a big distance cyclist?
So 100 miles is kind of like the benchmark, doing a century, as it's called.
That's awesome. How many times have you done that? Too many times to count?
Too many times to count.
Awesome. All right, last question on this is how much does a polar bear weigh?
My guess would be about 1,500 pounds.
Right. I have no idea. It's just. I
thought you were going to tell us the answer, Chad.
I could probably Google it real fast.
Yeah,
all right, you made it through the rapid fire question, so congratulations on that. I really want to dive in. It's interesting. So, full disclosure, Brivo, the company that you are the CEO of, is one of our vendors of choice. We've got a few Brivo accounts out in the world, and it's been very interesting to watch the company grow. So we've been connected with the company since I think 2006 or 2007, and just to kind of watch the company grow and develop has been really, really cool. just recently, you were named one of the top 25 most influential people in the security industry, and you also are going to be inducted into, or have been inducted into, the Security Sales and Integrators Hall of Fame.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about that. Like, that's crazy. Like, that's an awesome accomplishment and awesome recognition. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I'm certainly very honored to have received both of those accolades, and it's great to spend, I think, almost 20 years now in the security industry and have the things that I started 20 years ago, literally, particularly cloud computing, matter, and to see the rest of the market come around. So I think, as they say, history is told by the victors. I think this is a case where the things that we started doing a long time ago have proven to be dominant forces in the market, and so I think the rest of it follows from that.
So one of the things I remember speaking with you a couple of months ago back in the Brivo Summit that you guys had, Brivo and Eagle Eye Summit. And one of the questions that I asked you was how you kind of got started in this. How did this all happen? Give us a kind of a quick rundown of how Steve Van Til came to be.
Sure. I started one company early in my career. It lasted about 6 months, which I think is the typical lifetime of a lot of startups. And so I learned a lot from that. This company was started during the .com era, and we originally set out to provide security for package delivery. We saw Amazon and all the others coming out, delivering things to people's porches and to businesses, and just sitting out there. We thought that was a vulnerability. So we built an access controlled smart box, a thing you could put other stuff inside of that was connected back to the internet. So it was an early Internet of Things device, and began selling that and had it out in a couple hundred homes in the DC area. When the .com bubble burst, new venture financing became very difficult to come by, and we didn't think consumers were going to be that interested in opening their wallet for this newfangled thing. So we went back to our board and said, hey, we've built an access control infrastructure that connects to anything that can touch the internet. Why don't we pivot that and connect it to buildings and do commercial access control instead of connecting it to these boxes and doing e-commerce package protection? So they thought that was a good idea. We pivoted the company in 2001, relaunched with our debut at ISC West in 2002. So literally 17 years ago next week. And that's how we got into the industry.
That's wild, though, that 17 years ago, or I guess prior to 18, 19 years ago, you developed something that is very, very relevant today. I mean, that's the Amazon delivery package system. All of that stuff is very relevant, but because it was early to market, it was before people were ready for it. Then you pivoted, and which is a big thing in entrepreneurial, in the entrepreneurial atmosphere. You've got an idea, pivot, adapt, and go, which sounds like that's what happened with this Brivo product.
It is, and the other interesting what goes around comes around point is that today, particularly when we look at the multifamily market, but also the general commercial market, a lot of what is pushing people to enhance their access control systems is the need for all those e-commerce deliveries to get through the front door to a package room to an individual residence door, wherever it may be. That package delivery phenomenon has forced every building on the planet, I think, to need some sort of access control to receive those planets. So it is still, ironically, a driver, even though we're not doing the exact same model that we started out with.
So back in the early days, when you were going through all of this, and you said, all right, well, that's early to market, not a major success right now. We got to change gears and go this way. Had you any idea that you would be sitting at a place right now where, and I'm not even sure you can give us the update on like total number of employees that Brivo has and basically the organization and the company that it's turned into. Did you have any idea that was going to eventually be the case?
Well, certainly, and I know you feel the same way because you started your own business. You always hope and expect that that's where you're going to end up. So it's still gratifying and somewhat surprising when you do, just given the mortality rate for a lot of startups. So we're very happy to be where we are. And to give you a little bit of an update, we're just shy of 200 employees right now. So that kind of gives you a sense of the scale that we've achieved. That is wild.
And it's so cool because being on kind of on the other side of the security industry, but watching Brivo, it's really been, from our perspective, kind of a trendsetter in in the security world, because it's more of a software company. It's more of an app development type company that is in the security industry. That's the way I've always pitched it to our customers. Is the biggest difference to me that a company like Brivo has is that it is a app development type software company that adapted to the security world instead of somebody in the security world trying to adapt over to the software side of things. And that's a big difference. Is that kind of how you see yourself?
It is. And I'll be candid, when we pivoted into the security industry, none of us were security people. We didn't know a thing about it, 18 years ago. And I think on the one hand, it's a curse. On the other hand, like in many, many other examples that you can think of, coming in with what the Buddhists call beginner's mind allows you to see things in a different way and not see obstacles where perhaps people have been in that field for many years see obstacles, and to basically believe nothing's impossible. And so I think coming in not knowing anything is also a gift in itself.
Well, and the other big thing that I've seen is that it changes the whole perspective from the user interface side of things, because it's very user driven, less of the installer driven, right? And that's kind of a benefit for the end users.
It is, and I think the industry is going to keep going. I'm glad you brought up user-driven. I think the industry is going to keep going more in that direction, because look who's interacting with these systems now. Mobile credentials have become a big thing. They're growing probably more rapidly than anything else in access control or the rest of the security industry. That's putting apps in the hands of regular people, as I'll call them, who are coming and going from buildings, interacting with the security team at a building perhaps. That dynamic of our applications and our products being in the hands of literally orders of magnitude more people than they would be traditionally means that we're going to have to accommodate that group, cater to that group, and in the eyes of many of our customers, serving that group and being attractive to that group is an important differentiator.
So I want to switch gears a little bit, going back to something that you just said. Your team has grown to over 200 at Brivo. Obviously, that opens up some new challenges. What are some things that you're doing? When you first started, obviously, there's a small core group of people, and then it's kind of adapted and grown over the years. What are some things that you're doing as kind of the CEO position to build that team, to kind of strengthen that team, to develop that team on a regular basis? Some kind of practical takeaways that somebody like our organization can apply, or maybe others that are watching or listening.
There's two things I'd like to talk about. One is onboarding, and the other one is management training. Mm-hmm. So one of my favorite things is that we've changed the way we do onboarding. So I personally do an orientation for all new employees once a month, whether that's 3 people coming in that month or 10, and get a chance to meet everybody and give them that connection to the top of the organization. But the most important thing we do is 30 days later, with that same group, after they've been in the company for a month, we ask them, what could we have done better with onboarding? What did you find difficult? What was good? What was not good? And every single time we do that, we get about a half dozen to a dozen suggestions. Many of those are as simple as getting a second Keurig machine so the line's not as long in the morning. Others, which are more substantial, are, gee, we really wish we had a better employee directory so that I could know my colleagues by name or identify somebody from an email and put a face with a name. So we put together something called Pingboard, which has been very well received. And so that whole process of spending the time with new people and getting their perceptions, because, anytime you become accustomed to an environment, you stop seeing what's going on. And so what we want to do is tap that fresh perspective that people have coming in and get the benefit of their new eyes and help us grow the organization. The way we phrase it to the people coming through this program is, hey, this is an opportunity for you to pay it forward to the next incoming freshman class behind you. And so people really gravitate toward that. The second thing is we've spent more time lately putting together a bit more of a formal management training program. And I would say it's been the best received initiative that we've done in almost 20 years of running the company. I spend a lot of time addressing the company, as you can imagine. And when we put together the very first session of this management training program, looking at the faces and the eyes of the people sitting in the room, they were more engaged and more interested and more hungry for management training than probably anything else we've ever done. And so that's a program that's really getting some legs now. And I think it's important, as all of the recent studies have shown, that the first line managers in the company are the single most important success factor, and making sure that they know how to do what they're expected to do, since many of them are first time managers and may not come into the position understanding what that means.
So I've got a couple of questions on that, because that's really awesome information. The onboarding orientation type stuff, that's powerful. I think small business as a whole struggles with that, because everybody's busy, everybody's trying to get things done, and you got somebody new in place. Yeah, all right, we're excited we have somebody new in place. All right, come on here and help us out, because we're already overloaded, and we overlook the fact of, hey, let's take the time to get them acclimated into our organization and make sure that they know what's going on. So that's really awesome. The management training, how often are you doing that? Is that like a continual thing, or is it a curriculum type series? What does that look like for that ongoing process?
We've done, I think, 4 sessions in the past 6 months, and the first 4 were really internally developed, otherwise known as doing it by the seat of your pants. We've now started working with somebody that's got a little bit more of a developed curriculum around this, and what we're planning to do is have 2 or 3 overlapping sequences of the curriculum that are offset by 6 to 8 weeks throughout the year, so that if you start in January, you're getting in that first sequence of the year. If you start in March, then by April you'll be starting, and so they'll be running concurrently but overlapping and just continuously cycling through.
So you see that as a value add to, obviously, your team members and your organization as you're growing, because that's a huge investment of time and energy and resources. What's the driving factor behind that?
Well, it's 2 things. One, on behalf of the company, we know that investing in line managers, first line managers, will be beneficial to what we're doing. It's going to help our customers. It's going to make us a better company. But I kind of think that every company owes something to the people that join them, and making them better at their career and helping them get to the next place that they want to go is something that we can do with this program.
So on that note, that's like kind of key leadership information right there. But as a seasoned CEO, what are some tips, some tricks, some lessons that you would say, hey, if I'm talking to the next generation of leaders in your own organization or maybe others, what are some pieces of advice that you would give them to say, these are some things that maybe I missed first go around, or I had to learn the lesson the hard way, or here's something that I found really valuable that would be of benefit to you for growing your business?
I think if I look at the long arc, when we started in this business, and I started out originally as the chief technology officer, so I was very closely aligned with the product. I thought product was everything. Make the right product, and the world will beat a path to your door. And of course, a lot of great products have been created without that happening. And so I think the next evolution was build a great sales organization, and you can sell as much of your product as you have the energy to sell. And I think that has its limitations also. I think the final unifying thing is understanding why people come to work and what their motivations are, and making sure that you're addressing those. And I think if you take care of those, which is another way of saying getting the culture right, then all of those other things that you're trying to do follow from that. And so it took me perhaps a little bit longer to come to that set of priorities, as opposed to focusing on product or focusing on sales, and looking at how happy are people to be working here, and how engaged are they with the company. And then good product is an outcome, good sales is an outcome, good customer support is an outcome.
So you're talking about leadership and business culture, right? I mean, and that's very relevant in everything that we're doing. But earlier we were talking very specifically about the industry and directions and trends and all those things of the industry. What are things that you're doing to kind of keep yourself mentally sharp on all those things? Because that's a tough road to hoe, where you're talking culture and business development, and then also industry information, and trying to keep all those things well balanced.
I'm with Warren Buffett and Bill Gates on this, in that reading is perhaps the most important investment you can make in yourself as a leader. And that includes reading certainly within the industry, but it also includes a lot of reading outside the industry, because I think one of the things that is important for this industry is to look at what's going on elsewhere that I can learn from. What are some of the analogies in other parts of the business world or other parts of the technology world? How can I bring some of the things that people have learned from those other quadrants into what we're doing here? How can we introduce something new that perhaps isn't going on in this industry and deliver a better product or deliver better service or anticipate the next big thing?
So with that said, what are some books or some things that you're reading now or things that you've read in the past that have been very impactful for you that you would say, hey, you need to look this up and really kind of embrace this?
I think if you're looking at management type of books as opposed to industry specifics, one of my favorite authors is still Simon Sinek. I think his first main publication was called Start With Why, and there's about 4 or 5 books since then. And that really addresses a lot of these culture issues and workplace issues and trying to understand motivations. That's an important thing. More recently, Tom Peters put together a compilation called the Excellence Dividend, which is the summation of all of the stuff that he's thought about in the past 20 or 30 years. And it's a very compelling book, but I think it's better consumed as an audio book because he's a great reader of his own material, and you get much more of the passion from it when you listen to the audio book.
So, I mean, those are obviously great pieces of advice. Now, I think one of the things that we had talked about in the past is, and this may be part of your management training, but you had mentioned that you had a kind of maybe a book club or something like that you did with some of your leadership team. Is that along those same lines, or is that something completely different?
The book club you're referring to is a couple of times a year. We'll do either offsites or we'll do strategy planning. And one of the elements of doing that is for everybody in the team to read the same book, 3 or 4 weeks beforehand, and use that as, maybe 20% of the curriculum or the topic matter that we use when we're finally getting together. And I find it useful because it brings in some new thought, but it also brings in some common thinking around a new subject. So, for example, one of the books that we brought in this past year was Powerful by Patty McCord, who, if you don't know her, was VP of Human Resources at Netflix during its early days and was very influential in creating the culture deck that Netflix is known for, and has a lot of fairly radical views on how to structure organizations and how to get the most out of people, what does and doesn't matter. And even if you don't agree with everything that's in the book that you've chosen, it does get people talking about how we can adapt some of these things, how we see ourselves in light of some of these principles. And I've just found it more useful than walking in and everybody having the same thoughts that they always had before anyway.
Yeah, I really like that, and I actually borrowed that idea from you, and we implemented it here where we did the book from David Marquet, Turn the Ship Around, and it's one of the we kind of found that same thing. Yeah, you read the book, you understand the concepts. Not everybody always agrees with all the concepts, but you talk about it in terms of what's applicable, what's not, and how does this reflect on us. It was very, very beneficial. So I guess thank you for that idea, and it went over really, really well, and it's something we want to continue to do going forward. Kind of in that line. That Netflix book that you just mentioned is the next one on my Audible list. I will probably have it knocked out. I've got a little airplane ride next week that I'll probably be able to kill that one on. With that, you're dealing with other business leaders all the time, I would imagine. At what level are you doing any type of mentorship? Either you have mentors that you're dealing with that are helping coach you and that you are mentoring as well. Is that something that you're doing on a regular basis? And if so, what are some of the takeaways that you've gotten from that?
I think I'd probably spend more time thinking about mentoring people that are inside the company and focusing on their needs than I do on my own. I think, at the stage of my career I'm at right now, you can never have too much mentoring, right? But on the other hand, I think it happens more naturally among peers at this. And so I enjoy all the opportunities I have to interact with peers, whether it's at conferences or business meetings, but I'm more focused on transmitting what I've learned and what others have taught me to the people that are working here now. And as I said before, the thing I discovered about starting that process formally in a management training program, people are very, very hungry for it, and that's the thing that they really want at this point.
Kind of like internal coaching of your organization. It's where you're getting some big impact.
Sure, and there's no, formal program doesn't satisfy exactly the same need as individual coaching and individual mentor relationships, but it's a way of I hate to say it, shotgun approach to at least getting things started and saying a little bit about, this is the culture that we have at this company, this is how we do management at this company, because what you find in any random group of people that you brought into the company is that they are bringing with them the management beliefs and practices of wherever they worked before. And in some cases, that's a really great thing. In other cases, it's not such a great thing. They're also bringing with them perhaps the best and the worst boss that they've ever had before and the things that they've learned from those people. And so as a way of level setting and talking about, here's how we do things here, here's how we treat people in this organization, here's how we treat customers in this organization. Those are important things to make sure that everybody understands the principles that drive us and will end up behaving the same way in a similar circumstance with a customer, a partner, or whomever. So that's important. Otherwise, you really don't have any coherence as an organization.
So switching gears yet again, we could talk about this all day long. This, management training, team building, and all that stuff. One of the things that's very interesting, if you go on Google and search your name, article after article after article, and a majority of them are you're the author of. So you've written articles for Huffington Post, you've written articles, or that have been published on Huffington Post, securityindustry.org. You have a book that was published a few years ago, The 5 Technology Forces Disrupting Security, and you've just recently launched your own personal blog website, Steve on Security. So obviously you're reading a lot of information, you're sharing a lot of information, and you're sharing a lot of it in written form. And I was kind of scrolling through some of the stuff you've written on the Huffington Post, and it's not related to the security industry. It's talking about a lot of stuff that we're talking about here is, not wasting time with meetings that are ineffective, making sure that you have effective meetings for your team, building your organization, things of that nature. Why are you? What's the value that you're getting or that you're giving from sharing that information out, and what is the value add for doing that on a regular basis?
There's many, and I think my reasons for doing it have changed over the years. If you looked at what I was writing 10 years ago, a lot of it was very focal around the interests of Brivo, and so writing about topics that either were directly related to cloud computing or access control or security, or more recently mobile credentials and things like that. By the time I got to the book, it was really much more about casting security in the light of big technology trends that are frankly affecting every single industry and every single person on the planet. The motivation for doing that is that I think security hasn't had that treatment before, and I don't think I've seen another book that took a look at security and said, as a business, as a technology process, as a technology innovator, how does security look in light of cloud, mobile, social, AI, big data, things of that nature? And the effects there are, I hope, severalfold. One, for people that are trying to come into the industry and need an understanding of what's going on, whether that's a new employee at my company or your company, a new investor, somebody that's trying to understand the industry. These are important things that we're missing in the literature about the industry. I think for me, part of it is trying to give back. Another part of it is based on, you never really know if you understand something until you try to write about it or try to teach it to another person. And so you might think you know something, but try to teach it to somebody else and you find out where all the gaps are. So there's a personal growth or a personal improvement effect of doing any kind of writing or any kind of lecturing or teaching, that sort of thing. But mostly it's to cast the security industry in the same sort of light with the same sort of analysis that you find for, the telecom industry or the e-commerce industry or, anything that's active right now, because I think it's important to do that and for people to see the industry in a different way. It's been, at least at the time I joined, a little bit behind the rest of the technology industries, 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, and that's been fairly typical. Most people in the industry joke about it, but I think we're slowly catching up. We're becoming more current because some of the other things we've talked about already, which is getting closer to the consumer. Once you start touching the consumer, meaning the person who's coming and going from a building, an employee, a tenant, what have you, you really can't afford to be behind the times anymore. You really can't afford to hide behind, the guard's desk or anything else like that with crappy technology. You need to be as good and as effective as every other app that people are dealing with in their lives. And so I think that's bringing us closer to being current with where the rest of the world is around mobile apps, around web apps, around AI, fairly soon, and machine learning. So that's very exciting.
Well, it's interesting that that's an interesting take on it. If the apps and the software and the interface that the end users are dealing with is subpar from whatever other apps they're dealing with, they're less likely to engage with it. And if they're less likely to engage with it, then they're not going to get the value out of it. And it's just this kind of, I don't know, circular conversation that then makes you less relevant. So I guess that's kind of what you're saying.
Yeah, and this is particularly acute on the residential side, which we don't play in. But if you take a look at things from a consumer point of view, you've now got some of the biggest tech companies in the world, like Google and Amazon, coming into the space and elevating the game to the level that consumers expect. And so if you think about the survival of the industry, the health of the industry, things like that, and what kinds of choices people will make when they can get a security product from Amazon that's as good as any of the other apps that they're used to seeing from that provider, a security system from a Google company that's as good and as modern and as slick as anything else that they're expecting to get from Google. That ends up being what all of us are competing with. So the good news is, I think it raises our game. They always say that if you want to get better at tennis or whatever, play against somebody that's better than you. Yeah. So I think having these big tech companies come into the industry is very good for all of us because it helps raise our game, which means we're going to have better products and better service for our customers. But you can't sit back in your chair and watch this happen without responding and doing something, because they will run over you.
That's an interesting perspective, Steve. So you basically just said, you appreciate the fact that these larger organizations are coming into this space because it's making you up your game. But the second part of that is, but you can't just rest on your laurels and say, hey, well, we've been here for 20 years. We've been here for 17 years. Who do you think you are? That just means that you have to evolve to the next iteration and keep on going because you have that experience.
Yeah. I mean, one of the conversations that I've heard dozens of times over a dozen years in the industry was always around, if you recall, if you've been around in the industry for a while, you'll know that a number of different telephone companies attempted to make headway in the residential alarm market. And everyone beat a hasty retreat after a few years of finding out how difficult it was, how it's challenging, how installation of security systems is different than hanging a phone on the wall, and that running central stations and doing all the other things that go along with it are very difficult. And so I think a lot of people were very comfortably saying, hey, look, the telcos have come and tried to, run over our field several times and they've all failed. A couple of the cable companies have tried to run over our field and they've all failed. And so we don't really have to worry about these Mongol hordes coming in from the outside. But guess what? The newest wave of Mongol hordes coming in is Amazon and Google and venture-funded companies that have $100 million in the bank. That's a different game. Yeah. And so just because nobody succeeded in taking the field 15 or 20 years ago from the outside doesn't mean it's always going to be that way.
Valuable advice. That's interesting. That's a very, very interesting way to think about that, Steve. Hey, I want to be very mindful of your time. I guess the last quick question that I want to ask is related to APIs. I know just from an overall perspective in the programming world, APIs, which for those of you may not have ever heard the term before, application programming interface. Give a quick definition of what an API does.
An API lets one set of computers talk to another set of computers. But the important thing for all of us in business is that there's an API economy that springs from that, which allows us to add value to somebody else's business or somebody else's computing infrastructure to add value to ours, to do things that we may not want to do. So for example, in the case of Brivo, we have a lot of companies in property management or health club management or workspace management that don't want to do access control, but they want to roll it up into whatever they're doing. Yeah. And so that's a way that they can consume the product without the user interface so much as the underlying services.
And it was interesting just kind of hearing a lot about it, because we've been seeing and hearing about APIs for a long period of time, but actually seeing them in play now in the security world is becoming very exciting, because it opens up all new worlds of opportunity. You have systems that once before could never talk to each other, that an end user, like you were saying, a security guard or a property manager had to log into 2, 3, 4 different systems to manage their entire facility. Now it's becoming more and more possible that they just log in to one place and do everything, because all of these systems are integrated and talking to each other.
Exactly. And it's become really an everyday thing, even for end users who want to do integrations. I mean, a competent programmer can integrate something into our API in a matter of, days or a couple of weeks, depending on the complexity of what they're trying to do. And that's certainly very different than 15 or 20 years ago with software development kits and all the rest of the things. Usually a lot of legal agreements that people used to require that none of us do require anymore. So that whole world has changed from both ease of use technology standpoint, as well as the kinds of relationships that are prevalent. So for example, if you look at our website, or if you look at Google Maps website, what you're going to find is a drive up API interface with all the documentation right there, some sort of form that you can fill out to get an API key, and you're off to the races. And that's really been a huge enabler across the entire spectrum.
Yeah, it seems like the perspective used to be, hey, stay out of our software, stay out of our systems, and now it's some people are adapting the philosophy of, sure, come in and let's connect and let's get better together, which is very exciting for the consumer, because that means that you're getting a more value-packed proposition for everything that you're trying to accomplish.
Absolutely.
Well, that's very exciting. Listen, I definitely appreciate it. We could have a whole other conversation about that. I know you guys at Brivo are doing all kinds of other interesting stuff from team building perspectives and ways that you're bringing new innovations to the market and all that stuff. And we could talk about that a whole nother podcast episode. So we'll definitely have to have you back on as your schedule allows. But it's been a very exciting conversation today, and I've taken a lot away from it. So hopefully the folks that are listening and are watching will take away from some of that as well. I can't wait for those people that are listening to hear those sirens that came by just a few minutes ago. If they're listening in the car, that may give a nice scare. But thank you very much, Steve, for being on the podcast today. Those of you who this is your first time listening or watching, we have 33 complete episodes online now, locdoc.net/podcast, and we invite you to go check all those out. Make sure you subscribe. You can do that on iTunes, Stitcher, Anchor, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you're listening to podcasts, you can subscribe to that. And the video version of this is available on Facebook as well as our YouTube channel. Just search LOCDOC INC, and you'll see it there as well. Steve, I guess you've got a big week next week at ISC West in Las Vegas.
Absolutely.
So I will see you there, and thank you again for taking time out of your busy schedule to be here this morning.
Thank you, Chad. It was my pleasure.
Have a great day.
You too. Thank you.
To learn more about the topics discussed today and to connect with us online to hear all of the episodes available, visit locdoc.net/podcast.
We got so much to say. We got a podcast to make. We're sipping on lattes, and it's time for a coffee break. It's time for a coffee break. Oh yeah.
The Coffee Break Podcast is brought to you by Loc-Doc Security. We'd love to connect with you online on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and LinkedIn. Just search LOCDOCINC.